Hello again, and welcome to the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We are not doing this live today. This has been pre-recorded for Thursday. Got a very special guest. I've listened to this guy's show probably 100 times. It is one of the most unique and best sports podcasts I've ever heard. My guest is Tyler Siskey of the McCready and Siskey Podcast. Excuse me.
No, you're good.
Tyler got here by working at umpteen different FBS and FCS staffs. He's been in Alabama. He's been at Ole Miss. He now runs Quick U, which is a recruiting service I think that coaches use. I hope I haven't done damage there with my intro to you, but what I like about you is you've been there, you have lived this, you're a truth teller. Your style at this is amazing. If people don't listen to your podcast, that they should. So with that, welcome to the show, Tyler Siskey, and any gaps or imperfections in the resume there, feel free to correct me.
That was pretty good. That was a nice, clean intro. Pronounce the name right. That's the first starting point, pronouncing the name right. So I've been doing it for about 20 years. I coached for about 20 years. Had a high school stop in there at St. Paul's Episcopal in Mobile, which was really good for me in my career. I got to coach some really good players, some that are still playing, started doing this podcast stuff for fun, and I just kind of tell it like it is. I don't sugarcoat anything. Kind of, I guess you'd call it peel back the curtain style. I guess is probably the right way to say it. But just tell things like they are.
Yeah, the angle that you have that I think you use is really well is you have done things at a level that people like me have never dreamed of, and I think that's what, if you're going, why would I listen to this guy's podcast as opposed to other guys out there? It's because Tyler has seen and done things at a level that most of us in the sports media business have not seen or done. So with that, I appreciate your perspective. I know it's going to be different than what we offer on the show, and I look forward to that today.
Yeah, we'll have fun.
All right. Always a reminder, we're always looking for sponsors for the show. Email caroline.smith at southeastern14.com if you're interested. All right, Tyler, SEC, we're at the halfway point. Give me some things that have surprised you about the league, good and bad so far.
I would say I'm going to start. I'm usually a positive guy. Neil always says that I'm a glass half full guy, but I'll start negative. I just don't see there's not a complete dominant team in the league. I think every team has holes. I think the portal is taking an effect on the SEC in a different way than most conferences. And there hasn't been a complete team. Georgia, however, last week made me rethink that. I thought Georgia is probably as dominating. They look like vintage Georgia, and what I mean by vintage is they look like 21 and 22 Georgia last week, and they have a really, really good chance to run the table with their schedule. Good surprises. Man, I just think if you said this was a good surprise, I do think because there's not as many dominant teams, I think there's a lot more parity in the league than there's been in a long time. And I think you see that nationwide. That's not just an SEC thing, but it's kind of refreshing to be able to see new players involved in the game and new players, competing and getting after it and in close games. That part's fun. But I think as the year goes on, we get closer to the end of this thing. The SEC's got to be careful that they don't squeeze themselves out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the playoff chase is going to be fascinating. I think we'll get to that a little later in the conversation. But I want to ask you with Georgia, because I think we were all wondering the same thing before that Kentucky game where they just opened up a can on Kentucky. They're, plus 400 something in yards, I think 33-11 in first downs. I think the running game has been a question people have had. I think they've had to use wide receivers there at times. There's certainly not a Nick Chubb, I think, in that backfield. That's one thing that I look at and say, maybe that's a hole with Georgia. I don't know if hole is a fair way to put it, but what are places that you have questions about them in terms of being up to Kirby Smart's last two teams?
Well, I think actually the question will probably be on defense. Run defense is probably not as stout as it's been. Um, if you just look, defense is still great. Okay, I think they're second in the league on defense right now. So they still have a great defense. But what they've had the last 2 years was just, I mean, that was once in a generation kind of stuff, right? And I think they're a step down from that on defense, not far, but they are a step down. And like you said, having a dynamic player at running back. But I was talking to a buddy of this about this yesterday morning. I think is like, you have all these questions. Well, the running back and got this freshman quarterback, but you look up, they're eighth in the country in total offense.
Yeah,
eighth out of 100 and whatever 30 teams or whatever. They're eighth, and that puts them second in the SEC behind LSU. So, what questions? When you got a team that's second in the SEC in defense and total defense, and a team that's second in the SEC in total offense, that's a pretty good team. So, I just think with what the portal has done to this league, I don't know if you're ever going to see teams as dominant as you've seen, in 21 and 22 with Georgia, 2020 with Alabama, 2019 with LSU. I don't think you're going to see teams like that ever again. I think you're seeing the new standard of the SEC with the portal.
Yeah, well, hold that thought for a minute because I wanted to return to it. But I think the thing that was interesting to me about that game, and I know Kentucky had not played much of anybody, but the pass defense had been great. Max Hairston has had a tremendous year. Mark Stoops, always, those teams are good on defense. And then Carson Beck comes out, throws for almost 400 against them, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. And look, this is a guy that's only just now halfway through his first starting season. How do you think he stacks up in terms of guys they've had there recently and whether he's a guy to get them back where they want to be at the end?
I think he's more talented for sure. I think he's the most talented one that Kirby's probably had talent-wise. I mean, he's young and he gets better every single week. I made the joke, I guess, with Neil last week on the podcast. I think it was with Neil and Jeff Collins on the podcast. I was like, look, when he just relaxes and plays, he's really good. And look, he's got the safety blanket. 19 is the safety blanket. I mean, if he can close, if he gets in trouble, he can just close his eyes and throw it to 19 and listen for the crowd to roar. I mean, he's got the best safety blanket in the business. But the kid's talented, man. And I think they've known that for a long time. This has not been a secret coming out of Georgia. But he's getting better every week. And I think that's why you're seeing things starting to click a little bit. And I think really in the second half of the Auburn game, I know Brock Bowers went nuts, but he did some really good things. When he relaxes and starts trusting and gets reps, the more and more reps that he gets, I think the sky's the limit for the kid. I think he's the most talented quarterback I know that Kirby's had since there, and that's really counting Bennett and Fromm. But I think the guy's legit. I really like him as a quarterback.
You mentioned Brock Bowers. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be the SEC Player of the Year because, I mean, we never give it to a tight end, and they're going to spread the wealth a little bit. But is he the best player in this league?
I mean, you'd have to. I mean, he's definitely in the argument, right? I don't know who who would be the argument.
Well, I think in fact, glad you mentioned this. I did this on a Wednesday show. Right, that's why you're here. SEC Network picked Jaden Daniels as its offensive player of the year with their 4 guys. And I think at this point, he's the guy, right? I mean, the rushing and passing numbers have been undeniable.
Great year.
He gets that rib injury, comes back, leads him to, and that's really what this is about. It's about winning games, right?
Right.
I mean, you got a lot of guys having great years. You got Ray Davis at Kentucky. You got Spencer Rattler with no help. You got Brady Cooks had a terrific year until the second half of LSU. You got Luther Burden. You got Malik Neighbors, and you got Brian Thomas, although Thomas hadn't put up the numbers that Neighbors. I think it's really been a good year for offensive players in this league, but I think you sort of got to compare them to their positions, right? There's no tight end that's doing what Brock Bowers has done.
Oh, no.
And I mean, and I think that's kind of, if you want to make him the best player, to me, that's your jumping off point. You compare quarterbacks against other quarterbacks, and I'm not sure the separation there compared to position is as great as it is with Brock Bowers and whoever else.
Yeah, I mean, if you just made me, my vote would definitely be between Brock Bowers and Jaden Daniels. I mean, you got to look at who's the most important player to their team as well, right? And
yeah,
the thing with Brock Bowers is one is, and Jeff Collins pointed this out on our show a couple of weeks ago, is that think about all the stuff the kid has to learn every week. I mean, he lines up in so many different positions. And that's not, and I know everybody, it's not a Madden football game, right? When you're going and you're every week, you've got these new game plan plays and you go put things in there. One, you have to learn them all in a short period of time, but two is you have to execute them physically. I mean, like I'm talking about things, the timing and everything has to be down. It's not just a mental memory that he's having to do. It's a physical memory too, that he's having to do in a short period of time. And it's just really impressive from a quarterback standpoint. When you put a new play in, you may put new routes in, but it still may be a high-low corner read, right? And the reads may be the same as other plays, even though they're different routes. So there's only so many things that they can learn. And, can you throw the ball and read the defense? Like Brock Bowers is he's so difficult to tackle. He's one of the most, there are guys out there like this that are just hard to tackle. His balance and body control is unbelievable. And he's just, he did look human last week. He dropped a touchdown pass in the corner of the end zone. So that was, that's the first drop pass I think I've ever seen the guy drop. So I know he's not a robot, but he plays like one, man. He's the elite of the elite.
All right. I think the question that kicked this all off was surprises in the SEC, good and bad. And I got asked this on the show yesterday. My first answer without any thought was LSU's defense. I just have been stunned with how bad they have been. And I know they've got issues at corner. They brought in a transfer from, I think, Southeastern Louisiana, and sometimes it translates and sometimes it doesn't. But with all that talent LSU's had, and I get they kind of had to reset the roster when Kelly came in. They had all the guys leaving before and after the bowl game, and it wasn't vintage LSU. But I'm just shocked that with that situation, that defense is as bad as it is.
Yeah, it's some of it's inexperience on the back end. They have a ton of talent up front, and then things they're doing. When you have, Harold Perkins is an unbelievable talent, and but when he races up the field, you're starting to see people attack that in scheme. You're seeing, a lot of man free, a lot of man coverage, and a lot of people are attacking that in the running game, not just the passing game. They're not really passing things off on the back end. They're switching things off. They're not switching things off. They're running across or whatever. And so you got guys. Everybody's running every type of mesh and crossing route that you can run. Guys are getting hung up in trash, and they're getting scot free running out the back door. And I think it's hurting them in the running game too. I mean, if you can get in 12 personnel and do some formation, some unbalanced, and using two tight ends, and creating extra gaps, and you can make them a man short in the running game as well. Gap wise by creating more gaps, doing some unbalanced things, and there's a lot of things when you're playing that kind of defense and you're going to be aggressive like that, and you're going to play that much. Man coverage, you have to, be sound. And I think that's some inexperience on the back end, not getting lined up or not getting the right gaps and things at backer. And especially when you're playing two stand-ups, you got to be really sound. I think that's created some issues. Now, the good news is that can be fixed. And I know that's something I imagine they're trying to address.
Yeah.
But I'm excited this week to watch the game between Auburn and LSU. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, they've been pretty much, and it's gotten worse as the year's gone on because now people got film on, right? And so they know what to expect. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Ole Miss LSU game, and that was as an offense. I'm an offensive guy. Probably should have said that to start this show, but I'm a big offensive guy. So the amount of offense in that game, that was like a dream for me to watch.
Yeah.
But the very first touchdown of the game, they line up. Ole Miss lines up Quinshon Junkins, into the boundary. They motion him back to the backfield. Well, the guy that never switched it, he just went with him, and then he flared to the right. They run crossing routes with the two receivers over here. He can't run around at all, and Quinshon's over there fair catching a touchdown in the corner of the end zone. I mean, just a lot of things like that, easy in critical moments. People are taking advantage of playing so much man free.
I was wondering, did you see anything from them from the minute Perkins got there? I don't know how much of the game you got to watch, so I don't want to make assumptions here. But I was watching that game. I'm thinking they just cannot get stops. Cook is just picking them apart, and it's 22-8, and I don't see an end in sight. Perkins gets a pick. They get one at the end of the game, and they get a couple stops in between. I don't know if that's a situation where they did something differently, or maybe even just look, they're college kids. Sometimes you lack confidence. You get a couple of stops, it starts building on itself. I'm wondering if they found anything in the second half of that game that's workable taking forward.
Yeah, I watched the game. I don't know. I haven't watched the all 22 copy like coaches film, but I watched it, the TV copy, obviously. I don't know as much as, I think they were able to push the pocket a little bit better. And, so as fans understand, when you got Perkins and you got these edge rushers they have, they're forcing quarterbacks to escape to step up in the pocket. Well, if you can't push the pocket from the inside, then there's going to be escape lanes, right? There's going to be holes for him to step up and make a throw. If when you're that good on the edge, you have to be able to push the pocket. Well, they're so good on the edge that they're creating, you got to push the pocket quick. And so I think some of it's getting out of rush lanes a little bit and not retracing and things like that. And when they do that well on the inside, they're actually better on defense. But when you give the quarterback's job is to buy time, and I thought Cook did a good job early in the game of buying time. And you also got to have the right routes called, right? So when it's third, so here's a little coaching thing for you. All right, it's, second long, third down, third medium to long, throwing's coming. You're getting pressure when you're playing LSU. You're getting speed rushed on the outside. All right, so I know I'm probably going to step up in the pocket. I need something coming in my vision as a quarterback when I step up in the pocket so I can get the ball out in the throwing lane. So you got to have a crosser. So I think some of those plays, they really didn't have anything in Cook's vision on those early downs and got behind the chains. But that's what LSU has to do to get stops is get you behind the chains early or be able to push the pocket on the inside. It's not actually, everybody wants to throw garbage on the back end, but, there are 11 guys that play defense.
You mentioned Ole Miss LSU a minute ago, and that reminded me of something. When the SEC Network guys made their midseason picks for Coach of the Year, which is just kind of a weird award because a lot of times what it does is it takes the guy who had a bad or mediocre team that next year and improved it the most, whereas Kirby Smarts and Nick Saban seems like they don't win that award. The nominees, the guys they named were Saban, Kirby Smart, Eli Drinkwitz. I said I thought that you could make a case for Lane Kiffin too. I don't know that he's a guy, but I feel like he's at least maybe in the discussion, given what they've done with that offense. Look, they've had a good year. I know they lost the Alabama game. That was disappointing, but where would you put Lane Kiffin in that conversation, or would you?
For a Coach of the Year, I mean, it's early. Look, they've done – Lane, in my opinion, Lane is one of the top 5 play callers of my generation. I had a chance to work with him at Alabama. He's elite of the elite when it comes to play callers. Golly, I didn't even thought about Coach of the Year stuff. But yeah, I mean, they have an opportunity. They got a bye week. They're playing the best opponent of all time this week in bye. So they're going to win this week. They got if he's able to get through that Texas A&M game's coming up, it's going to be really big. He's got. I'm actually excited about next week. I'm going to take next week off, considering my past and who I know. They travel to Auburn, playing Hugh Freeze, and so I'm taking that week off. I don't need to listen to both sides of that rivalry or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't call it rivalry. It's like a personal thing, I guess, next week. But that game's going to be personal, I think, for both sides. So that could get weird. But if they find a way to beat Auburn, they got Vandy the next week, and then you start playing Texas A&M. That could set up a showdown, and now you're looking at a 10-2 season. Because I don't think they're going to beat Georgia. I think Georgia's on a different planet. But Ole Miss's big thing right now is defense. Okay, yeah. They have two big issues. I think Ole Miss does to really take this thing to the next level. Defensively, I don't think they're very good. And they found a way. Ironically, last week offense didn't play great. Defense found a way to win a game, which is encouraging if you're a coach. But offensively, they still have problems up front on the offensive line, and that they struggle sometimes to get the running game going. But they are elite when it comes to quarterback play. And Trey Harris, he's been banged up, but Trey Harris is, I think, one of the best receivers in the SEC. when he's healthy.
Why have they not been able to get Judkins on track consistently?
I think a few things. I think early they leaned a little bit on zone scheme, and that requires getting your offensive lineman running sideways. And I think in the LSU game, I think the run scheme was different. They were able to scheme up some things against LSU's defense, and they ran a lot more gap scheme and getting him downhill. He's not really a lateral sideways east and west runner. You want to get him downhill. And his, one cut, make him a one cut runner. I mean, he's really efficient. He's got really good balance and body control. But I think it starts up front. I think there's too much lateral outside zone stuff. I'd like to see a little bit more gap scheme, counter, power kind of stuff with him. And they were able to get him doing that against the LSU game. But that's who he is. And right now, just to be honest, Bentley's running the same scheme. And he's the backup, and he's more productive when he's in the game. You get more explosive runs with him in the game than you're getting with Judkins.
All right, I want to touch on the two Alabama schools for a minute here, Tyler. My answer ultimately on Coach of the Year was Nick Saban, and I don't think it's a clear-cut answer, but they have taken some bumps. I think you've got an NIL era that is got some philosophies maybe contrary to the way he tries to build his program. You can tell me whether that's fair or not. And they got caught in a spot where they don't really have a quarterback, at least not up to Alabama standards. And yet you've seen him 2 weeks ago. They go down and they plaster Mississippi State just by run. And you're thinking that's what they're going to be. Well, then they flip it. They turn Milroe loose and they win that game through the air against A&M. I thought that was impressive. I think he's got a defense where he's built back. I don't know if it's up there with the best defenses he's had, but it's pretty darn good, especially on the back end. I don't think Nick Saban has got enough credit for maintaining what he's built. And now you've seen a guy that can sort of absorb a punch and maybe change some directions. And you look up and they're back in college football playoff contention.
Yeah. When it comes to quarterback, people forget they had this run of quarterbacks they just had, right? So you had, Jalen Hurts, you had Tua, you had Mac Jones, you had Bryce Young. Okay. In case anybody doesn't watch football, those four guys are starting. There's 32 NFL teams, and they're four of the starting quarterbacks, right? So they're starting on Sundays. They're pretty good. And so it's very difficult especially when you got a guy like Bryce Young that's been playing quarterback for 3 years, been the starter for 3 years. Very hard in today's world of the transfer portal. And this is kind of what I was referring. This is part of one of the reasons I was referring to in the transfer portal. It's very difficult to go and recruit a quarterback out of high school that you have time to develop and is willing. That's that good. You're recruiting him to play at the University of Alabama. All right. And he's that good. It's very difficult for him to say, hey, look, now I need you to sit here for 3 years and wait your turn. That just doesn't happen. I think that's the problem with the portal in the SEC and I think that's what you're seeing with the SEC this year. And it's the first year that you're starting to see it kind of show itself is in the SEC for years, every school, your Georgias, your Alabamas, your Tennessees, all of them. That's why it's the SEC is they have stockpiled talent.
Yeah.
And okay, the guy that's coming in as the 2 this year, and he's playing 25, 30 snaps on defense or offense or whatever, he's just waiting for that guy to leave, and then he's the superstar. And then you stockpile this talent. Well, now in the world of the portal, these guys don't want to be the 2 in development. They want to go somewhere and play. And I'll use the example of LSU, and I can't think of the kid's name, so forgive me. But like LSU, great example. They lose their backup guard, okay, in the spring. He goes to Maryland because he's going to be the starter. Excuse me. And he's starting at Maryland. Well, what happens when he's got this huge high ceiling? He's a young guy, but he's got a massive ceiling. He goes to Maryland to be the starter, getting reps. Well, LSU, they need somebody to be a backup. And so what do? They take the guy that was a starting guard at Maryland and bring him in to be the backup. So they made a swap.
Yeah.
All right. But here's the deal is he doesn't have as high of a ceiling as the kid that just left. And so when you're having to bring in an SEC, you're bringing in these portal guys. These guys don't. There's a reason they went to wherever they went. Very few. Are there exceptions? Absolutely, there are exceptions. But for the most part, and look at the numbers. Last year, I want to say we looked at this around the draft time. There were like 50-something portal guys that went into the NFL draft last year and got drafted, but only like 4 of them actually moved up. Okay, like went from a Group of 5 school to a Power 5 school. And so that's just the stats. And those kids don't have as high as a ceiling. That's why they went to wherever they went out of high school. And so I think what you're seeing in the SEC is you're seeing backups, the guys that are your depth pieces that have to play and produce. They're ready to play because they know what to do and how to do it, but they don't have the ceiling of athleticism that the guys that left did. And so that's where I think the big hit is. And the same thing that happens with quarterback, right? And I just think it's very hard to stockpile quarterbacks. With that being said, yeah, that's the issue at Alabama. Besides that, if you put Bryce Young at quarterback at Alabama right now, if he's back for year 4, we're having a different conversation about Alabama right now.
Yeah, and that's what I understood too, was it wasn't that they just stopped recruiting quarterbacks. It just guys look up at the roster and say, well, they got this guy, that guy, that guy. My path to playing time's blocked. I don't want to wait. You go somewhere else. And that's how Alabama ends up where it is. But it sounds to me like you just kind of outlined a lot of why we're seeing the parity in college football today, which I think I have some issues with how it's made, but man, it is made for a fascinating game right now because I think it's as competitive at the top as I ever remember it.
Yeah, you got more parity across the board for sure.
Yeah.
Roster building is completely different. Look at what Deion and those guys have done out there at Colorado. He's got a whole new roster. You couldn't have done that. You had 25 chances to change it. That was your, for years and years and years. You had 25. Well, now the NCAA is throwing away the 25 rule, so you can go flip a roster however you see fit. You can go in. There's nothing stopping the next coach from going in there and literally cutting all 85 scholarships and starting completely over and go and signing. You can sign 85 high school kids, or you could go sign, 42 high school kids and 42 portal kids. You can literally, it's unlimited free agency. It's an unlimited draft. And so there's literally the old saying, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There really is. You can do whatever you see fit. I have my opinion on that and how it affects culture and NIL and things like that. And I think that's also a big problem with the SEC too, that no one is talking about. I'll give you some on your show that literally no one is talking about. Is the problem with the SEC is for most, when NIL came into play, okay? When NIL came into play, you're sitting in a league where you got 14 teams and you're going, NIL started, okay, well, I need to go get all these recruits and pay them because everybody else is. But the problem is that your depth that you have sitting on the bench, Maryland wants to pay that kid $50,000 to $100,000 to come play guard. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to. So now SEC's having to pay their own roster before they go recruit. And so if you don't have a massive amount, that's why the SEC is where they are right now, is because when the NIL hit, they had a roster full of players that they had to pay to keep from going. All right. Let me ask you a question. Do you think the third team safety at UCLA was getting offered $100,000 to go play at Alabama last year?
You wouldn't think so.
But do you think the third team safety at Alabama is getting recruited by other schools to go be with money?
Of course.
Does that make sense? The SEC has a roster. Every team has rosters full of players, backups.
Yeah.
That other Power 5 conferences are trying to pay to come.
Yeah.
And so they have to pay. It's not just about the initial NIL money that we can go get recruits. I got to pay my own kids to stay.
Yeah.
And so and in a league that primarily believes in building it from the high school ranks, well, they haven't used the portal button yet. So, they can't transfer. And if you look somewhere, that you better be good out of the portal though when you take them, because once you take them, they're yours.
Well, I want to ask you 2 things, and I have a feeling we could spend a while on it, and if you want to, I'm here for it. Second question is going to be if you're the commissioner of college football, you can change the rules to anything you'd want. I like that smile on your face because I know you've thought this through already. What would that look like? But the first question before we get to that, it seems like we have a system that is probably empowering some bad actors and maybe chasing some of the good ones out. Is that fair?
Very fair.
Yeah.
Very fair. I mean,
okay. How do you fix that and everything else that comes with this situation we have?
Oh, I could fix everything over a lunch meeting. I don't even need a lot of time. I could fix everything over a lunch meeting. We'd have plenty of time to go play golf after lunch. We could fix this thing. The entire system, the problem with the NCAA and the rules right now is the entire system is 100% player based.
Yeah.
Okay. And so every single thing they want, they get. If you can't do that in any situation in life, you can't do that. If I said yes to every single thing my kids wanted, okay, I mean, we're parents, okay? Name one parent out there, or I'm sure there are out there, go find me the parent that gives their kid everything. Go find me a parent that without working for it, let's call it for what it is. And so I like to say with Neil and myself, we're running for Common Sense Party 2024, okay? We just got to have some common sense, okay? Show me the parent that gives their kid everything they want, okay? Without working for it. Show me the parent that gives their kid everything they want, and let's go see how that kid turns out. How that kid turns out. So we got a system where the players get everything they want, all right? So the very first rule that I would imply if I was a college football commissioner, and it's going to piss off the people probably listen to your show when this goes live. What'd you say, Thursday?
Yeah.
The chat's going to be hot. There's going to be some pissed off people here, but it's the truth, okay? And the truth is, players cannot transfer immediately. If they want to transfer, they would have to sit out a year. That's it. You fix about 90% of the problems with that right there, okay? If you don't like your school, leave anytime you want to, okay? Anytime you want to, take off. But you just have to sit a year, okay?
Yeah.
That's how it was done in the NCAA up until about 3 or 4 years ago for a long time. And everything worked out normal, okay? So what does that fix? Well, kids are going to start right now. They're chasing checks out of high school. Here's the truth that nobody wants to talk about. Media doesn't want to cover it because it's not cool. I got a business I'm on, so I don't care. All right. So here's the thing is kids right now, when they go to make the decision to where they're going to go out of high school, a vast majority of them are saying, who's paying me the most money? Okay. And I'm going to take this check and I'm going to go there. All right. Just in case I like the school. And if you do like the school and you like the coach after you get there, guess what? All good. But if I don't like it, I'm going to hit the easy button and I'm going to transfer. All right. So that's problem one. Two is let's talk about NIL. Let's talk about money. Okay. Let's talk about money. All right. So if you want to control, like I'll use him as an example because he's across the street here. Quinshawn Junkins. Okay. Let's just say he's getting paid $800,000 this year. Okay. Let's call that. If he goes out and has a really good year, okay, and he had a Heisman Trophy, which is what he was like on the Heisman watch list and all that stuff. Let's say he was having a Heisman Trophy type season. What's to stop him from holding Ole Miss hostage and wanting 1.1 next year because LSU is going to pay him 1.1? Nothing. And so you stay in this cycle of it's free agency every single year. So what sport, there's a reason the NFL's kind of got this thing figured out. I mean, who's the best player right now in the National Football League? You got one person to put on your team. Who you putting on your team?
Pat Mahomes.
All right. What do you think, Patrick Mahomes, how much money do you think you could get if he just was a free agent every single year?
Well, you're saying the same thing Mike Leach said last year, by the way, in his last media days. I don't know if you caught that, but he made the exact points you're making. I thought they were sailing it thin, Tyler.
But if Patrick Mahomes, how much would the Jets pay him right now to be their quarterback?
How much you got?
Right. That's what you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
every single year he would reset the market every single year. And that just it
Yeah.
makes no sense. And if you want to transfer, and here's the other thing, another thing that nobody wants to talk about, okay, is these kids are leaving all the time, right? Well, you know what's not going with them? They're losing
Coaches.
credits.
Well,
They're
that too.
losing credits. Okay. And we're supposed to be getting an education and graduating and all that stuff, right? Graduation rates are going because these kids aren't graduating and they're having to go back or whatever it is, but they're losing credits. If you've ever transferred, if you've ever transferred on this thing, and when I transferred, I transferred from Auburn to Troy, which was a FCS program at the time, which made that immediate eligibility. Okay. Which I think that's great. Go back to the old rule. If you want to transfer right away, I do agree with the grad transfer. That will be your free agency. If you get your degree, okay, you can transfer as many times as you want after that. That's why I don't have a problem with what JT Daniels has done. The guy's got 84 degrees. If you graduate, that's the whole point of going to college. Graduate, you can transfer all you want to. But that tells you if I'm a student and I want to transfer, I don't like the situation I'm in. All right, I can go in and bust my butt and get my degree. Okay. The other thing is look, let me tell you why I enjoy college football. College football as a player taught me so many lessons in life that took me, because I was terrible. I was an awful player. All right. I had to fight through adversity. These kids don't fight through adversity anymore. All right. They get adversity. They don't like it. They hit the ease button. They quit because they can transfer. There's no life lesson being taught right now. The coaches can't coach the players hard anymore. You can't. If you coach the kid hard anymore, I quit. So now we got coaches who are turning into and that's why you're seeing coaches get out of the game. Okay. You're seeing legendary coaches not like it. And we talk about this word culture all the time, right? It's because you got coaches that are having to be the kids' friends, not their coach. Okay. Did you play football growing up?
I did not.
Okay. Did you play any kind of sport growing up?
Yeah.
All right. What was your sport?
Soccer.
Would you call your coach your friend?
Sometimes the best ones, no.
But you get what I'm saying here. It's like,
yes.
You have to look, you're dealing with 18. It's getting worse now. You're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids that now have money. Okay. They do stupid stuff. They have to be held accountable. All right. For their actions. And right, wrong, or indifferent. I can't tell you how many kids, a majority of the kids, I coach wide receivers. The majority of the kids that I coached in college came from a single parent home. Okay. They didn't have a father figure in their life. Okay. I was it. And so I can't I'm not there to be there. I'm there to keep them accountable and hold them accountable for their actions and make sure that they're learning how to be productive citizens. And that's not easy. Okay. You have children?
Yes. 2 of them.
How many children do you have? 2?
2. Yeah.
All right. How many times if you had the transfer portal in your button, how many times have your kids been so pissed at you that they want to hit the freaking button and leave? I mean, seriously, you know what I'm saying? Like there has to be that whole rule. It fixes everything. That would be, I could do this all day, but that's the number one rule. And actually rule 1A before we even started that was to get a college football commissioner. That's rule 1A.
No doubt. I've said, look, if Nick Saban ever leaves football, I put him in charge yesterday.
Because problem number one, whether they like it or not, this may not piss off people. I may get some high fives back from the chat when they go live. Is you're under an organization and rules that are being made by people who have never broken a huddle before.
Yeah.
Okay. They have no idea. We got people making recruiting rules that have never been on a home visit a day in their life, never been recruited, never recruited a kid a day in their life. So my number 1A rule would be to put people in power that actually know what they're talking about and actually make the rules that are feasible. And I will give him credit. Charlie Baker, since he's become the president of the NCAA, he is actually asking people their opinion, and that's better than the last guy did. He's actually doing some things that are actually on the right track. So I know this is early, but I'm holding out hope for Charlie Baker. He's doing a really good job so far. But the whole thing, before he got there were rules in place that make no sense that the last guy did. I mean, they're terrible. They're terrible. And they're terrible for coaches. They're terrible for the players. And we've taken a great sport and we're doing everything we can to run it into the ground.
Well, the problem, and this is, and I've been in higher ed. Higher ed is run by ideologues, and not people who've been and lived it and done common sense things. And that, I mean, that's that would be one start to fixing it. People that ask people what it means. But I'll full disclosure here, I was one of these guys a few years ago that said, "Hey, wait a minute, the coaches can leave at any time. So why do we, and especially, okay, players go, you tell me, most of the time players go to schools because their relationships with the coaching staff, right?
That's
And we're going
correct.
to run this system and whatever. So, and just use an extreme example. Let's say, and this wouldn't happen, but just to prove a point, let's say pick a team out of a hat, Kentucky. Let's say Mark
Yep.
Stoops leaves tomorrow, and that they bring in somebody to run the triple option. And you got kids that weren't, again, I'm making an absurd point to make an example. You
Yeah,
got
no, you're
kids
good.
there that don't know the new guys. They were close to the old guys. And now we're running a system that I'm not a fit for, and I'm trying to get to the league. How do you deal with that issue practically?
See, I've actually thought about this. All right, so I think there's two things when you have a coaching change. I've been on both sides of the coaching change. I've been the coach that left, and I've been the coach that arrived. Right, so I've been on both sides of it. I think when your coach leaves, okay, and I'm talking about head coach because you can't ever do this to assistant coaches or the system wouldn't work. But and this is called compromise, okay? So I know this is very hard for the player side to understand this because this is called compromise. I don't like it, but I think it's a fair, common sense compromise. When a coach leaves and a coach gets fired or whatever it is, kids they're kids, okay? People, and can we call them kids anymore when we're paying them all this money? That's the argument. That's for another podcast. But here's the thing: is kids are emotional. Okay, I was actually on the road with Matt Luke when we got fired. Okay, sitting in Full Moon Barbecue, about to go to Robbie Ashford's house for a home visit. Okay, matter of fact, we had just gone to Ricky Wright's house. That was who we went to before we got fired. All right, so we were recruiting for outside backer, not safety, by the way. All right, so but anyway, long story short is when we came back, I'm still an employee at Ole Miss, right? I technically haven't been fired to head coach, and so I had to go to this team meeting when the AD comes in there and tells the players that the head coach has been fired. Okay, you had a head coach in Matt Luke, had unbelievable relationships with the players, all that stuff. How we got that's a whole different story, but multiple. I mean, in the double digits of players got up and walked out of that meeting pissed off, emotional. Okay, so kids are emotional and they make emotional decisions. When it's the biggest decision of your life, don't make an emotional decision, make a business decision. Okay, and so if a coach leaves, okay, coach leaves and takes another job. I think with the portal windows, the way we had it, I think you should not be allowed to transfer until the spring window. That gives you 6 months, okay, with a new coach. That gives him time to come in here and say, hey, this is what we want to do with you. Hey, and so you can figure out if that's going to work out for me or not. Does that make sense? Like, because
Yes.
look, you don't want to make an emotional decision because I really like this guy, because you never know. You never know how it's going to work out. Okay, you have no idea how it's going to work out. It could be the best thing that ever happened to you. All
Yeah.
right, it could be the worst thing that ever happened to you. But let's take an example like Ole Miss, right? So when we got fired from Ole Miss, I was on staff with Matt Luke. We had two quarterbacks. We had Matt Corral and John Rice Plumlee. Okay, John Rice Plumlee ended the season as our starter because Rich Rod was our coordinator. He fit Rich Rod's offense better. Okay, and so but Matt Corral, unbelievable talent, right? But top 3 arm talent I've ever seen in my life. All right, and so John Rice Plumlee could have said, okay, I get 6 months to see, okay, we got who's the new coach, what offense are we going to run or whatever, okay, and decide, hey, is this really what I want to do? I can leave at that time frame. Same thing with Matt Corral. Is this what I want to do? If not, I can leave in May. Okay, so you give the new coach a chance. And I always told my players, okay, every time I've left when I left South Alabama to come to Ole Miss, same thing. I had a room full of great receivers. Okay, we had some really good guys. Jalen Tolbert plays for the Cowboys. Quan Baker Saints. We had a room full of dudes. All right, and Oh, I'm leaving. I said, no, just give the new. I had the conversation with him, and a lot of coaches don't, but I did. Look, this is the business. It's what happens. Give the new coach a chance. Okay, don't. I just don't think, and I don't think it's right either. Let's go the other side. I don't think it's right either for a coach to leave and take a job, and every player just jump the portal and go with him. Give the new coach a chance, because what's lost in all this, like I said before, is this thing called the college education. All right.
Yeah.
And Chris, we don't know each other. Okay. Do you know the one thing, without knowing you, do you know the one thing that you and I and every single person listening to this podcast have in common? The one thing. Do you know what that is?
I'm not sure where you're going with this, so I'll just let you.
All right. You let me go.
Well, I mean, we'll have football, but
at some point in time, okay, at some point in time, we all get told we can't play the game anymore. Okay. Yeah. At some point in time, you don't play the game forever. Okay. Some of us is at 18. Some of us is at 22. Some of us is at 32. All right. But we all get told at some point in time that we can't play the game anymore. And you have to have an education and understand how to be a productive citizen in society when that time comes.
Yeah.
And so don't hit the panic button. Don't hit the easy button. Give the new guy a chance. And I don't think it's right for players to leave at December because their coach leaves and takes another job. Stick around. Give the new guy a chance. You'll be surprised a lot of times. Now, if you're not happy with it, Bolton May. They'll still take you. Do you think Lincoln Riley would have taken Caleb Williams in May if he had waited till May?
Yeah, good point.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It'll all work out. And so I think if a coach leaves, the players should not be allowed to leave until May, and then that's a free transfer. That does not count.
Yeah.
That would be my compromise.
So just to be clear, you do get one of those free passes if there's a coaching change, but just a semester later.
Yep.
See, I don't know how you could. That's to me is hard to disagree with.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like that. It's really it takes like 30 seconds of thought, but the people who that make the rules, they don't. They're so scared of getting sued, right? They're so scared of lawsuits. Well, why are they scared of lawsuits? Because you got a rule book that's this thick that, like, I'm not joking. You can go read the NCAA. Depending on what chapter you open up in that book, you can have rules that say totally opposite things. There's precedent the way they word things. Just make it cut and dry. Let's put it on a piece of 8 by 11. These are the rules.
Yeah.
Let's go. It's like tax codes, man. It doesn't have to be complicated.
All right, I think this will be the last one for you. We don't spend a lot of time talking about them, but it feels like you got 13 teams in the league that are, either competitive right now or been competitive within the last year or two, and then you've got Vanderbilt, which they're building facilities.
That's your home crew, man. Come on.
I know, but I gotta ask. And I know how do you fix that? I mean, they've got talent issues that you and I see. They're finally building the stuff that everybody built 15, 20 years ago. So let's give them that. I think it's going to be nice when it's done. But with NIL, and it's hard to raise money when you are losing, which makes the cycle worse. What is a realistic scenario to where you could make Vanderbilt respectable? How would you do it?
So you're saying if I was the AD at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, or whatever.
I would not take the AD job at Vanderbilt without having in my contract that we got 25 admission waivers for NCAA. If they're NCAA qualified, because that's the only way you're going to give them a fighting chance. I mean, you're taking the pool of available athletes to recruit and you're cutting it by 95%. I mean, seriously, I bet you can't. It's that much. It's
well,
not.
I mean, I think from what I understand, I think the standard there is along the lines of a 22 ACT and a 3.0 core. It cuts that many people out.
100%.
Holy cow! Okay,
100%. Go find me how many SEC scholarship players had a 22 or above and a 3.0 core in. I did academics and eligibility for a living. It just doesn't happen.
Okay.
It does not. A 3.0 core, and for the people that don't understand, we're talking about you got to have 4 Englishes, you got to have 3 maths, you got to have 2 social sciences, you got to have an extra English, math, and science, and 4 additional core. That's 16 core classes.
Yeah.
Now, that's over a 3.0 core, easily less than 10%, and maybe less than 5 that have a 3.0 core. Now, we haven't got to the test yet. We're talking about just a 3.0 core. Now, the trick with a test is sometimes a kid will go to a very easy high school, okay, where high school classes, they're just passing out A's and stuff, okay? And you see a lot of times kids will have a very high core and a low test score. And then vice versa, you have kids that go to a very difficult school, especially a lot of private school kids, a lot of kids that go to magnet schools and things like that. They will have an extremely high test score, but a very low core. That's why there's a sliding scale in the NCAA. But you're cutting the possible pool of candidates down by 90% by having no exemptions.
So you're not even having the conversation unless you get that answered.
I wouldn't. It's like the same thing with and you see it. It's the same thing with Ivy League schools, the way they do. When I was a high school coach, I coached at St. Paul's Episcopal School in Mobile. And so the amount of Ivy League and academies, we were a permanent stop for the Air Force, Army, and Navy. They came every single year because they're in the same kind of plane. So, it's just very difficult to do. And, Air Force is having some success, but they're playing in the Mountain West. Vanderbilt's playing the SEC. Yeah. I mean, you get different. What if Air Force was in the SEC, right? I mean, it's a different animal. But that would be the first. I would not take the job unless we would get 25 exemptions. Wouldn't even consider taking the job.
And that's why James Franklin won. He got those until one.
It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
I
understand. I do. I understand. But you can't blame, because there's one bad apple. You can't. I mean, when you bring in, I mean, that could have happened anywhere. Does that make sense? Like, I don't see that as there's no excuse for what happened. None. It's bad.
Right.
Bad ball. But that wasn't because he played football at Vanderbilt. If the kid played football at Oregon State, the same thing would have happened because that's the kind of person he was. Does that make sense? Like it's
not like it's not like the world is devoid of smart, bad people. It's not like the world is devoid of good people who didn't do great on their ACT.
Right. I mean, the same thing could have happened to somebody that had a 4.0 and a 36 on ACT. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not. Yeah. I don't think that had anything to do with their grades. I guess that's my point. And if you're trying to, because I think, look, I've told you before we got on, I like Clark Lee. I think they're schematically what they're doing. I like him as a football coach. If Vanderbilt ever gets rid of him, they have lost their mind. Okay. He is perfect for the job. He is doing everything. He is maxing out that job for what it can be. And until they get exemptions, if you gave Clark Lee 25 exemptions every single year, then we can start judging him like a normal football coach. But until that point happens, I don't understand how you can do that. Especially back to the Mark Stoops stuff, same kind of thing. Is like, I know we probably won't get there in a second, but kind of like NIL, right? Is like I view NIL the way I view coaches and what kind of job they're doing is very similar to how baseball does with payroll. I mean, that's how coaches should be judged, not because in today's world, not necessarily wins and losses like normal.
I want to ask you something that I'll get you out of here in just a second.
Good.
One criticism you've got Wake Forest. Okay, Wake Forest does not have 5-star athletes all over the field. They've got that slow mesh system that works pretty well. One of the counterpoints I hear in Nashville is, well, they don't have anything that really fools anybody. Does that hold water in this situation?
They're still able to recruit. They still have exemptions, right? Like you got to, in my opinion,
probably. You know what? Honestly, I'm out of my depth on that because I don't cover the ACC.
They do. But they don't have a lot, but they do.
Okay.
And you still have exemptions, and they're also playing the ACC. Now the ACC is better this year than they've been in the past. But who does Wake Forest after they had? Who did they have last year that made them so good? What was that guy's? What position did he play?
Yeah, well, exactly, and he's doing pretty well where he is now too. So
yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is, when Vanderbilt was winning, what position were they pretty good at?
Well, they weren't as good at that position when they were winning, but I thought the difference, and you played against them. I thought the difference then was they were better in the trenches than they'd been. They actually had some linemen that could go, get you deep into games, and they weren't blowing
Up
it.
front,
But
they were good.
they were solid there. Yeah.
Yeah, up front they were good, and they had I'm talking about from a Vanderbilt perspective. They had a
Right.
good quarterback for a better than normal quarterback.
Also,
Okay,
Carter Samuels was a good ball player. Yeah.
yeah. So but in this league, in the SEC, you got to be really good at three spots. You can be average as grits everywhere else on the entire field. You got to be good at offensive line, defensive line, and quarterback. I will take Johnny 3-star. If you say, hey Tyler, look, here's what you can do. You can have 10 5-stars and build a roster. I'm going to take 40 linemen, 5 offensive linemen, and a quarterback, and I'll take 2 stars everywhere else, and I'll take 2 stars. I don't even care, and we'll win a ton of football games in this league. That's how this league. That's how college games won.
And it's funny, you see a lot of those guys going top half of the first round when we get to April. So,
but you look back to Wake Forest. I guess my point is, this year they don't have Sam Hartman. They're 3-2, but they're 0-2 in league play. They haven't done anything. You know what I'm saying? Like you're going to see it as the year goes on.
Yeah. I've kept you a while. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Really appreciate it. Just going to give you the floor at the end. I'm going to ask you a question, then give you a minute to promote your business and your podcast. Any big storylines in the SEC that are out there that maybe nobody's talking about or that we should have talked about today?
Big storylines. I think the SEC is in legitimate danger of not having a playoff team.
Okay.
That would be a storyline I would look for as the season goes on.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
I think you could get into a situation, and the easiest way that happens is if Alabama runs the table, Georgia runs the table, they meet in Atlanta, Alabama wins that game, and it comes down to then you have Texas run the table on their side. And so you got a one-loss Texas and a one-loss Texas Big 12 champ, one-loss Alabama SEC champ. They're going to put Texas in that last spot because they beat Alabama. That would be the scenario. That would be the scenario.
I've said for some time, I wish we could have had the 14-team play or the 12-team playoff this year because I think it would be fascinating.
It would be. This is the year. This is by far the most parity in the league. I mean, in the NCAA, as far as like you go, there's no team like there's been like think about it. I mean, last 2 years it was Georgia, and everybody knew it. Everybody knew it from game one. Knew Georgia was going to win the national championship, and they're really Ohio State's good. They'll be there. Like you could name the teams, right? You could pick the 4 or 5 teams, and they're going to be one. You could literally take 2 or 3 teams versus the field. Who's your team this year? Everybody has questions.
Yeah.
The Pac-12, ironically, in the Pac-12's last year is probably the best year they've had in years. I mean, I can't remember the last time they were this deep. I really enjoy watching Pac-12 football for the first time in a long time. Like I'm in every Saturday. I'm watching. The Big 12, which is ironically Oklahoma and Texas, are both really good football teams. The Big 10, you got 3 there that it can be Penn State, Michigan, or Ohio State. ACC can be, really bothers me. Miami's got a really good team. You don't have the issue at the end of the game last week. You got Miami, North Carolina, you got Florida State, and then quietly over there, just lurking in weeds is Louisville, right? And the SEC is just going to beat itself up, I'm afraid. But in the SEC, let's be honest, the SEC didn't do great, hasn't done great in out-of-conference play versus marquee opponents. I mean, you got the loss to Texas, and you got the loss to Florida State, and you got Florida's loss to Utah. You got the Power 5 versus Power 5 matchups did not go great for the SEC this year.
Tyler, it's been so much fun. Really appreciate you spending your time. Tell folks about your business and your podcast, which if you've listened this far, you know now why I call it a must listen every week. And actually it's 3 times a week?
We do it 3 times a week. It's McCready and Siskey Podcast. McCready and Siskey Podcast. We do it on MPW Digital. We changed yesterday. I'm sure you talked to Neil about that.
Found out the hard way.
Yeah, found out the hard way. Couldn't find it. But we're on the MPW Digital YouTube channel 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 2 p.m. And you said tomorrow is what time? Is this show live tomorrow or Thursday? We're live
It'll
at what
run
time?
about 11 Central. We'll start it. Yeah.
All right, so it starts at 11. So we're right at noon. So in 2 hours, okay, in 2 hours, go to MPW. Just give it a chance. If you don't like it, I will. If you don't like it, I'll buy you a cup of coffee the next time you drive through Oxford, Mississippi. We try to be funny, we entertain, tell it like it is, and not afraid to ruffle some feathers. And tomorrow will be Kane Womack will be on the show on Thursday. The head football coach at South Alabama is a good friend of mine. I think he's one of the superstars rising up. He will probably be coaching a team near you in the near future. So I think he's a fast riser and really, really good people. And at the end of the day, we try to be good people and promote good people in the business and tell it like it is.
Well, I know our audience, they will love it. Tyler, we'll find an excuse to do this again, I hope. And
Absolutely.
surely enjoyed you being here. All right.
I enjoyed it as well.
He is Tyler Siskey of the McCready and Siskey Podcast. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll be back on Friday. Probably we'll have Trey Wallace with us. If not, we'll call an audible and figure something out. But anyway, thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll see you again on Friday.